Welcome. This is an insight webinar. It's to try and sort of give some information about where telecoms as a business, where the environment seems to be going over the next 2 to 3 years. What we've done is we've taken parts of our Telecoms Mini MBA program and we've sort of chunked it down, and over the next few months we're going to be presenting different elements of the Telecoms Mini MBA, just taking some of the main subject areas and try to present them in a very condensed way. So I think we did the industry outlook before Christmas, but you'll see quite a few of these insight webinars coming up over the next few months. So very welcome to everybody. I can see that we've got people from all around the world, so welcome to the webinar. Okay, just a couple of little notes at the bottom of your screen there. You can see some web links to pretty useful Informa sites. So we've got the Telecoms Academy and the Innovation Academy websites. We've got Connect 365 Telecoms Media and Technology, so that's our sort of big sister, as it were. So they're the people who run big organized events like AfricaCom, and even used to run the Mobile World Congress. Ovum Research as well, another sister company where we get a lot of our insights and our research data from, and we work very closely with those guys. And finally, telecoms.com, which is a fantastic resource for everything telecoms news and industry resources. Okay, just on the admin side, we are recording the webinar, so we'll make that available after the event. Towards the end, we can probably make a little bit of time for questions as well, so if you can save most of the questions to the end, that would be fantastic. Okay, so what are we going to cover? Well, we're going to look at benchmarking different telecoms operators, just see where we're going as an industry. We're going to discuss the telco business goals. We're going to look at customers, experience and services, and leading nicely on from that, we're going to look at digital transformation. What is it that telcos need to do to position themselves properly for the next for the next period over the next 2 to 3 years? And then as part of that, we'll look at transforming business models, which to me represents the way in which the telcos think, how they monetize their activities, how they engage with the customers, and it'll be interesting really just to have a quick discussion about some of those aspects. Okay, so as I said, in terms of topic area taken from our Telecoms Mini MBA program, so that's our featured course really for this webinar. The Telecoms Mini MBA, if I can just tell you a little bit about it for the next 30 seconds, is part of a postgraduate certificate which leads to an award from the University of Derby in the UK. We've had 10,000 managers throughout the industry through this particular program over the years. Gets fantastic feedback, and we deliver it on a public basis and in-house as well. So that's the Telecoms Mini MBA, and you'll see underneath there quite a few different options, different courses that sort of tie in with different aspects of the same sort of topic area: strategy, digital transformation, etc. Okay, enough of that. So first of all, benchmarking and telco business goals. So there's a question mark there. Is it just value? And I guess to shareholders, it probably is just value. You know, they invest, they expect a return on their investment. So underpinning pretty much every strategy, every decision that the CEO and the board make is maximizing financial KPIs. So what we've done is we've just taken just 3 of the major KPIs, and we've taken the top 40 operator groups just here. So that's a really good representation of the industry. It's not mobile, it's not fixed, it's a combination. A lot of these operators are primarily, in some of the markets, converged operators, but in other markets the same operator might be represented here as just purely mobile or just purely fixed. So headline figures here, when we look at total year-on-year growth in terms of revenue, is that the current business environment for telecoms, we're showing growth at 2.9% on average. So that's some big variations in that, but 2.9% seems to be where we're at. There's additional activities being added by the operators all the time. So I think what I take away from that is that without any of those additional activities, some of which are substantial, others perhaps not so substantial, things are fairly flat in terms of like-for-like services and like-for-like revenue. So in terms of overall business environment, growth is fairly flat. What does that actually translate to in terms of profit? Well, it's showing here around 9% on average, but again, depending on the company, depending on things like exchange rates movements. So, for example, Russia, South Africa, you might have to factor in some of the considerations around things like currency fluctuations. But again, these major telecoms operator groups, you know, from Singtel in Singapore right the way through to Turkey, Vodafone, UK, Germany based. On average, we're making about 9%. How does that stack up? Well, you don't have to go back too far to see that that figure is more like 15% or even 18%. In terms of outside of the industry, you might see perhaps supermarkets at 6 or 7%, depending on which market you're in. But it's okay. It's not like it was in the heyday, but there is still significant profits out there for telecoms operators. It's hard though, and we need to spend a lot of our revenue on maintaining our position. Some operators spend more than others, but this particular chart here shows how much we spend on our network, not just the network, but any capex items. So primarily the network, but how much we spend compared to revenue. So you can see there the average is around 16%, and again it varies massively from Sprint right the way through to Zain, who obviously during this period have had quite a heavy, substantial set of investments. But on average, 16% of the money that we bring in goes out on things like the network. Now, what we've been looking at here are figures for the third quarter 2016. The latest figures that Ovum have. The next set will be due out fairly soon. I'm not sure that we're expecting any sort of major shifts in this. So these are sort of representative figures, which will just give us a sort of snapshot of where we are as an industry. If we want to break that down a little bit, we can use some of the Ovum data. We can look at the changes in a 7-year period, perhaps to 2021, which I don't think I'd like to go out any further than that, because it is very much crystal ball gazing, really anything beyond about 2020. But mobile data is showing growth over that period of around 77%. Mobile voice, a massive decline really in terms of the revenues, 41%. Fixed data, all those broadband packages giving us some growth, which is pretty much offsetting the decline in voice. Or that's what the analysts think. Okay, so we're talking about the business environment. Of course, being able to do business in the telecoms industry, everything comes through the telecoms operator business models. Even if you're a telecoms vendor, a system integrator, you still got to understand the business model of the telecoms operator, because you're selling it into that environment. The telecoms operator environment is changing rapidly, but still at the heart of it is the license. And when you look at the mix of activities that the telecoms operator is trying to sort of pull together and monetize, a lot of this is dependent on the license. So I think what I'm saying is you can't really divorce the regulatory environment from the potential to make money. So we've got a small note at the bottom there saying the license and associated spectrum can massively impact the operator's business model, which is absolutely spot on, because the license gives us permission to operate. It defines the scope and the range of the services that can be included, and critically for mobile or radio-based systems, it defines the spectrum. And if you've got a choice of doubling your spectrum for a reasonable price or putting in double the number of base stations, then I think in most cases, if you do the sums and the price is right for the spectrum, you're probably going to go for the spectrum, because it will enable you to perhaps double your capacity almost, rather than massive investment in new kit. So in terms of what the CEO and the board is looking at, operating in a financially sound and strategically sound way within the market, which is defined by the regulatory environment and the licenses, is absolutely key, and that doesn't really change. The dynamics of it all changes, but the overall requirement doesn't. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to attract and keep customers, and as markets saturate, keeping customers and loyalty programs, and stopping those customers from taking advantage of short-term offers from the competition is key. So this is where things like bundling and converged services really come into their own. This is why a lot of operators are focusing on these aspects, convergence and bundling, etc. But even so, it's still about providing the right services and increasingly enablers. So in the old days we might have been talking about voice and connectivity, but now we're talking about perhaps digital services and about cloud capabilities. It's about minimizing the costs, but not at all costs. We've got to be able to compete and maximizing those business KPIs. And Philippe, I've just seen there that you put in there, plan ahead effectively. Absolutely, but it's difficult because the commercial teams they've got to react instantly or within a week to anything that the competition is doing, but the technical teams, they've got to plan a year, 18 months, probably out to 3 years with some fairly concrete plans. So planning ahead effectively is really difficult, and we've got to try and second guess what's happening and what's around the corner in terms of the major opportunities, and it's really not easy. So that probably defines the overall business environment. That's the sort of place where the board is. In terms of customers' experience and services, we can probably sort of look at it more specifically now and just say, look, a lot of operators want to be converged operators, and a lot of this is because we need to get that churn down. We need to improve loyalty, and also things like TV and content. If we get the right sort of strategy in place, that's perhaps one area where we can get some decent incremental revenues. If you've got the rights to national sporting events, then you might be able to charge either a premium for that, or it will absolutely put you in the best position to attract new customers onto your multiplayer and bundled service offerings. So the fully converged operator in a lot of markets is where the telecoms operators are trying to get to. In other markets, we're not there yet. We might have dual play or triple play, but I think the fully converged operator in a lot of mature markets is the goal. Not the ultimate goal, but certainly the shorter term goal. But no matter which way we look at this, just like any other industry, we need to be effective in the way we engage with the customers in terms of the way we put the services together, we put those bundles together, the pricing, even the marketing campaigns, etc. And we can best do that by using segmentation. So whether it's your families, business people, frequent travelers, whichever way you do it. And I know that a lot of operators, certainly the ones that we work with, not all of them do it like this, based on based on behavior. Some of them still do it based on just prepaid, postpaid, and even sometimes on spend. But increasingly we're looking at how people consume the services and how they might want to pay for the services, and that really leaves us to usually behavior-based segmentation, and increasingly B2B, business to business. So whether it's enterprise or whether you're providing support services for virtual network operators or machine to machine, so supporting those industry verticals or government sectors, we need to start getting specific. And I think that's one thing that our analysts within Overman Informa are really clear on, that the stuff on the right hand side of this diagram, the B2B and industry verticals, we need to get good at something. If we're a telecoms operator, we need to be good at something to be able to support one, two, or more of these industries. Just sort of talking about those bundles a little bit more. A lot of the consumer segments are sort of leading us to embrace bundled offerings. You can see here that there's a lot of growth in some of these bar graphs, and this is about customers taking quad play or even 5-play services or 3-play services. The only one in this diagram which is decreasing slightly is dual play, simply because people are moving from just dual play services to 3-play, where we have mobile, fixed, broadband, we have TV, we end up with a whole range of bundled services. So I think it shows really clearly from 2012 through to 2020 the number of people who are being transitioned onto bundled packages in a lot of markets is very significant. So the data sort of backs up what we were saying there. You can look at TV, and in the rush for telecoms operators to add television and video to their offering, you can see here that there are different strategies. So you've got a joint venture strategy, you've got an acquisition strategy, you've got a product strategy, and we've got lots of operators in here, some of the big operators as well. Telefonica pursuing an acquisition strategy, and Vodafone as well. Meanwhile, BT over many years have tried to build their own product within their own brand. So there's a lot of different strategies, but most of the big operator groups, either now or in the near term, will be adding TV and trying to make it a big part of their offering going forward. And then we can sort of look at other things like, for example, ICT, information communications technology. So the whole business of housing data, making it available, keeping it secure. That thing that's much wider than telecoms. We'll see telecoms operators really getting into this to 2020, and that particular digital service, as we call it, is showing growth, as is enterprise cloud. That's showing quite decent growth. You've got machine to machine, very closely linked with the Internet of Things. Some carrier billing there, and also telco TV showing a little bit of growth as well. So overall, the move towards those bundled converged services with television, and adding some of these sort of wider digital services, really sort of define where telcos are going right now in terms of services. So it's about digital services. It's about a really good offering in and around unified communications and collaboration. It's about those wider ICT services. It's about offering and starting to build capability around the Internet of Things. It's about broadband connectivity, making sure that that's absolutely aligned with what the customers want, and keeps the operator in a position where they can compete with other business models in the market, and of course content as well. Okay, so obviously we're covering quite some ground, but I think everything we've looked at so far is fairly well known by a lot of the operators, and we've been sort of dealing with it over the last 3, 4, 5 years and heading in that direction. But I think certainly from my experience going around the world teaching operator management groups, delivering things like our effective telecom strategy program and our positioning for the digital age program. Very few operators have actually made the digital transformation yet. Very few. The trends are, at the end of the day, that growth is flat. There's pressure on voice revenues. Data revenues are increasing, but traffic is increasing faster. So the operators are trying to get the right device strategy, pricing and bundling in place. Convergence and multiplay is key. We are adding content, TV services where relevant. We're focused on the business segments. We're putting in enablers for Internet of Things and digital services, and we are getting a little bit better at partnerships. This is the key thing, though. Telcos really need to transform, because everything we've talked about so far is fantastic, but there are so many disruptive influences out there, not least the over-the-top players, the internet business models, the customers and changing customer requirements themselves, that to be really successful going forward in a new age, and we'll talk about what that's going to look like in a couple of minutes, but we're talking about some really key enablers: agility, ability to respond really quickly, and we start talking about things like transient sources of competitive advantage, not sustainable sources anymore, but things that would help you make money over the next 18 months whilst this particular opportunity exists. In telcos, we can take 18 months to even think about a solution before we even start working on it. Well, we've got to get much faster. Customer centricity, so things like the minimum viable product. Let's get something out there, get the feedback from the customers, and see where that takes us. Alien concepts to people who've worked in telecoms. Partnerships, proper partnerships. We are prepared to pay a lot of money for the competitive advantage that the partners can bring. So it means what it really means, and this is probably the key thing: a change of culture. It means really embracing and making innovation work, or if you like, monetizing creativity. It's about getting the performance management and the key performance indicators looked at, changed, massively transformed. So for example, a KPI that we sometimes throw out there as a talking point is how many signatures do you need to spend $100,000 US? And I had one last week which was 21 signatures. Just too many. You cannot move. It will take months to get that through the system. And of course, alignment. Everybody working towards the same goals, towards the same strategic goals. We need to think about new business models and strategy, different ways of making money. And if we wanted to do this in a fairly structured way, you could do worse than looking at 5G. Start at the beginning with 5G, because 5G looks at things like the business case, the different communication scenarios. It marries capability with those usage cases, and I mean, a lot of work has been done on this already. The thing that we're really missing at the moment is just the technical detail of the new radio interface, for example. But 5G, if you want to look at how to position for the new age, it's more than just a technology. It actually sort of brings everything together. I mean, we've just established a 5G Mini MBA because there's so much in there in terms of 5G that you can actually deal with and talk about all the different business aspects as you start talking about the technology and how that's going to support the industry going forward. So transformation is almost certainly needed, and you can sort of identify some of the big parts or some of the big enablers for transformation. And the first one is probably a data center. I think it's no secret that some countries and some markets are perhaps a little less comfortable with some of the big internet providers holding data, information, not only for the citizens, but as we move forward over the next few years, all that company data, cloud-based company data, where the telcos start helping the industry verticals to digitalize as well. We need to house that data, And I think it's true to say that at the moment that the bets are that we prefer it to be local rather than held in other countries. So you're getting those data centers in place to give us the physical means to actually take our business model to the next to the next level. Yeah, Philip, it's a good question, isn't it? Will B2B companies trust more telecoms than Google's? I think in most cases, telecom brands are trusted brands in general. I mean, they're known as being slow, cumbersome, monolithic in some cases. It's not to say that Google isn't particularly trusted, but at the end of the day, some of these big worldwide brands will have information accessed by perhaps other players, government agencies or whatever. You can't, within your own markets, you can't really control that. So I think what we're saying here is that we don't know what happens in terms of trust, in terms of access going forward, but it's probably true to say that if you've got country interests at heart, then it's easier to control if your data is held locally. So this would be one enabler. Another one is probably this, actually, big data. So we go from business intelligence and data analytics to big data, deep learning, predictive analytics, something that can really help us transform the business, our own business, but also help us transform and help other industries digitalize as well. So you've got the data centers, and you've got the algorithms, you've got the know-how in terms of not only how to keep it safe and make it accessible at the right time and in the right place and in the right way, but also the know-how in terms of using it as well, for us as an industry and as a business, or to help other industries and other businesses. We also got to think about connected innovation and other key innovation initiatives and technology developments. Some of the adjacent industries or technologies which will impinge in telecoms, because remember, we are fantastic connectivity, but it could be around artificial intelligence, not least because we are moving into being much more concerned with things like ICT rather than just connectivity. So artificial intelligence, big data analytics, connected vehicles, smart cities, virtual reality, robotics, 3D printing. I mean, they're just some examples of some of the key innovation and technology developments that telcos are going to find themselves dealing with, maybe at the heart of, somehow consume with and trying to make money from. So this is going to move quite rapidly. We've sort of coined the term Internet of Things, which will help us certainly join our current business models in and around connectivity with some of these new innovative technologies. And the Internet of Things, sometimes people see it as connected devices and things like that, which of course it does include, but it is probably much more to do with businesses and government. So when you start looking at some of the really big societal changes that are needed in and around things like energy and education and efficient working, clean cities, all that sort of stuff, it starts getting really interesting. And there's a lot of smart city initiatives, for example, where the Internet of Things is a huge part of it, but it's not just about connecting to assess parking in the city or to enable efficient transportation through the city or waste collection. It's about actually doing something with the data, which again sort of points towards telecoms operators having fantastic foundations in and around things like data centers and having all of that in place, so that they can actually be at the heart of some of these new Internet of Things initiatives. And just taking smart cities, for example, who's going to run that? Who's going to be at the heart of it? Is it going to be the municipalities? Is it going to be IBM? Well, you'd hope that the telecoms operator, with fantastic trusted brand and all that security around data access and massive number of customers, etc. You know, this should be at the heart of it, at least in some way. Now, as an industry, we are working on this. You can look at the Next Generation Mobile Network Alliance, for example, NGMN usage cases, and they've identified some of the usage cases for 5G. Now, the point about this is that 4G is great. Certainly, some of the latest, so I'm just reading one or two of the questions that are coming in, which tell us. Let me just come back to you on that one a little bit later on. Yeah, so you know, 4G is absolutely fantastic. LTE is fantastic. It gives us a lot of data where we need it, but it doesn't necessarily cater for all different usage cases. So what we've done is we said, okay, 5G is going to be more about the Internet of Things and being able to deal with some of these other usage cases. 4G is going to be fantastic. In fact, 4G, in terms of later versions of 4G, is going to be a big part of 5G anyway. So we're not going to get rid of 4G. It's going to be right there, probably at the heart of it. But we have got these other usage cases. So you've got high density broadband access, high user mobility, ultra reliable communications, lifeline communications, extreme real time, which brings in things like the tactile internet. This is enabling things that we can only dream of right now. You know, a lot of people are working on obviously quite a lot of sort of product suites and ideation for some of this stuff, but we need that bedrock of connectivity in place, and this is where 5G really comes into its own. So if you want to look at a way in which telcos need to transform and where they need to go next, 5G is you could do a lot worse than this. Not only does it deal with the business, even ways of monetizing the network going forward, but it also gives us really good links to the next set of connected innovation, for example. Yeah, so you're just asking about in developing countries. I think, to be honest with you, what we're seeing is something like the smart city being a catalyst for Internet of Things, or even individual industries. And I think rather than the Internet of Things being a sort of countrywide initiative, what we're finding is that we've just got to the second big digital revolution. The first one was where connectivity was king, but now it's about other industries and how they engage with their customers, and how they bring efficiencies and things like better use of energy resources into their business models. So from that perspective, as long as the telco has the capabilities, or they've got the partnerships in place so they can bring those capabilities into that market, then it's going to be probably on a deal by deal or initiative by initiative basis where you support those other industries, or you support, for example, smart cities. So if you look at some of the smart cities that are currently being developed in Qatar, for example, a couple there, or even Santander in northern Spain, what you find is that the municipality is engaging with a number of different players, including the telecoms operator, to make that city smarter, or if you like, make it more efficient, or make it a better place to live. And from there, what you find is that your capabilities will be needed elsewhere. And I think that's the way it's going to work. So, I don't think you necessarily have to go at this countrywide. Obviously, connectivity for people to use the mobile phones, that's got to be countrywide. But I think Internet of Things is probably more of a sort of project by project basis. Not least because this next diagram really represents the sort of network aspects of 5G, and what we're seeing here is that we're using this term slicing. That's the key thing on this diagram, slicing. So you've got a single network through which you can provide enhanced mobile broadband, or massive IoT, or mission critical services. So some of those usage cases which are on the last slide, suddenly within a single network you can have what some of us engineers have termed quality service. This is like This is like, proper definition of quality of service, really fast, almost zero latency communication, or just big chunks of data that are available in specific places. But if we get this right, it's going to be a fairly efficient network, or relatively efficient network to put in place, because it will utilize those cloud concepts. It will utilize this thing that we've probably seen in the news, network function virtualization, which allows us to buy generic off-the-shelf computing equipment and then program it to be whatever we need it to be. So in the old days, the HLRs, maybe now something more like a SIP server. Software-defined networking, and also some of the current generations of technology. So things like the more advanced parts of LTE, or whatever else is specified in the next year or two with 5G, some of the new radio interfaces. So in terms of transformation, it's not just business transformation, it's not just usage cases, but it's the network as well to be able to cope with that. And operators are just starting to look at this. We're not really going to get the first standardized versions of 5G until 2020. A lot of talk about 5G at the Mobile World Congress a couple of weeks ago. So I think some people want it to come this side of 2020, but it doesn't stop some pre-standardized versions of advanced connectivity being put in place, and some operators calling it 5G. Okay, so just the last 5 minutes or so, just for all of this to work, we need to probably change the way we think about the operation, think about ourselves as a business, think about ourselves as an industry. I think it's fair to say that as telecoms operators evolve even further down the line, then they're going to find themselves as one of these three things: just a bit pipe, really concentrating on value for money connectivity. It could be a full service provider with multiplay, pay TV. Do we call that a digital service provider? It's providing some digital services, but probably the full definition of a digital service provider would be on the right hand side here, which already a lot of our customers are making noises about moving towards this. That not only are they a full service provider for consumers and B2B, but they've gone beyond the B2B thing, and they are trying to position themselves as full ICT service providers, information communication technology service providers, housing the data, looking after the data, making it available, bringing their capabilities in terms of big data analytics to the fore, helping the other industries. But for any of the operators to be truly digital, it's probably the ones on the right hand side, the ones who adopt the position on the right hand side of this diagram. For them to be digital, our analysts are really clear. It's in the DNA. It's the way they operate. It's the way they think. They're thinking should be thinking much more like internet type companies. So it's practices, it's the technology and the frameworks that they've got in place. But essentially, today's operators, I think I can look around the world. Most of today's operators are at best communication service providers. Some are sort of semi-digital service providers. Are any of them really digital? There might be one or two pockets. I mean, one that I really like Singtel actually in Singapore. They've got some great things going on over there. But most of the other operators, not least because they are so successful being CSPs, most of the other operators, the transformed bit of it isn't yet visible enough. Let's put it that way. But we're working on it, and this is really defining some of the business environment for sure. Just one example is this, where we need to think differently. Internet of Things, the technology stack. So this is put together again by our Informa analysts. Lots of things going on with the Internet of Things: data, gateways, integration, the actual devices themselves. Only 10% of the revenue is connectivity. So when you think of it in that context, the telecoms operator to make money from the Internet of Things, and therefore by definition, as we get into the 5G age, to make money from 5G, we need to really think differently. Fortunately, we can look at other organizations, not least the internet companies. What they're trying to do is they see barriers, see problems, and they try and remove barriers, and this is consistent. You see this throughout a whole stack of internet big over-the-top companies, and they get economies of scale in place, and they become worldwide operators like Netflix, for example. So we can learn lessons really from those guys and partner with them. But at the end of the day, we've still got a lot of things that they don't have. So the operator, right at the middle of the business environment going forward, a lot of things that we can offer our partners are things like our billing systems, our distribution channels, the fact that we can market, we can advertise, we understand the local markets really well. We can offer international expansion. So BMW perhaps wanting to partner with Vodafone for some of the connected automotive type applications. Why would they go with Vodafone? Well, because it's a big operator that offers a sort of single access to perhaps a lot of Europe. I mean, that would be an example there. Device integration, we've got fantastic at quality service, and with 5G, all that network slicing stuff, we can handle that going forward. We've got great connectivity, which again the over-the-top providers don't have. We've got the application programming interfaces for access into the networks from fairly standardized back-end, and we've got cloud capabilities of those data centers. So there's a lot we can offer going forward. So in terms of the business environment, going forward, it's about getting all those enablers in place and not being afraid to partner. And I think that sort of probably defines really the next stage, doing this properly. Okay, guys, right. So there we go. Just short of 45 minutes. That's all I've got really to run through. Just a reminder about the Telecoms Mini MBA. I'll open it to questions in a second as well. So that was some, for those who missed it, they're the sort of things that we would tackle on the Telecoms Mini MBA. We'd probably spend about half a day at least talking about that stuff, as well as a lot of extra time talking about trends and technologies and customer engagement and finance and even leadership and people. But that's just one aspect of what we do on the 5-day Mini MBA. So for those who want to stay behind for questions,